Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this episode of the Adopt 365 podcast. As ever, let me introduce my co-host before we get started on the main subject of today. I'd like to welcome Anthony Charman
Hello.
and Megan Warren.
Hello.
So just as a reminder, everyone, the Adopt 365 podcast is brought to you by the Microsoft 365 specialists at Computer World. We offer a wide variety of Microsoft 365 training, consultancy services, and we're a Microsoft CSP provider. So if we can be of any assistance helping you drive the adoption of Microsoft 365, specifying your next Microsoft Teams room, or maybe helping your business move to Microsoft Teams Phone, please get in touch with us and we'd love to be able to help you and have a conversation helping you get to that next stage of your journey with Microsoft 365. Today's podcast is all about Microsoft Ignite and those subjects that we saw get announced last week. But before we get onto that main subject, we'd like to do around the room, kind of ask the hosts what's the standout feature or what's the new thing you've noticed inside Microsoft 365 since the last podcast. So Megan, over to you first. What's that standout feature that you've seen?
So my feature is something called Speaker Coach in Microsoft Teams meetings. So when you click the ellipsis at the top, under where it says like record, transcription, all of that good stuff, there's now something called Speaker Coach. And if you turn that on when you're speaking and in a meeting and just leave it on throughout the whole meeting, whenever you speak, it will give you real-time suggestions about how you're presenting and how you're speaking. So if you started talking really fast, it would tell you to slow down. If you used filler words like and and even other things like again and stuff like that you use all the time, it will come up and suggest maybe not using that word as much. So nobody else in the meeting can see it. It's private to you. And then at the end of the meeting, you also get a summary that says how many minutes you spoke in the meeting, and out of sort of 5 key areas, what you had suggestions on. So whether it is pace, whether it's tone, whether it's language, and it gives you those suggestions. So it's a new feature. I can see it being really useful, especially if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily like presenting or maybe doesn't even get much feedback when you're presenting. It's nice to see that you can get that in real time and you get a private summary at the end of it as well. So that's my new feature.
Nice. Anthony, what's yours?
So I'm really enjoying the Cameo feature in PowerPoint, which allows you to embed live video into a PowerPoint presentation. So if you just go to the menu, the insert menu, you can now insert a cameo, draw a box, you can make it a square or a circle. But what appears in that box when you're presenting your PowerPoint is coming live from your camera. So I think it just creates far more involving meetings for people. It's not like the presenter mode, which allows you to embed yourself across the top of the PowerPoint. It actually puts you in the same place all of the time, and you're neatly wrapped up in the PowerPoint presentation. And it just works really, really well. I know Microsoft have been talking about doing this for a long time, but it's now live in PowerPoint, and I would suggest people give it a try and see how they get on with it.
Definitely two really good features there that I think hopefully they'll help make meetings a bit more engaging, help you improve your flow and your presentation skill. I think we've seen a similar feature to that you mentioned, Megan, before in PowerPoint. Whereas did you have to run it in a test mode and it told you about it, or you might have been able to do it when you were presenting, but it's good to see that be brought into virtual meetings as well.
Yes, you used to be able to rehearse with Coach in PowerPoint, which would give you those real-time suggestions and then a summary at the end. Obviously, that's great when you're presenting. You probably don't have the nerves that you have in a real presentation when you're delivering something. So it's good that it's now in that team meeting so you can get those in a real life scenario rather than just when you're sort of rehearsing a presentation.
And I think we're seeing more and more of this AI-based stuff coming into the Teams environment where, it in effect is listening to what you're doing and making comments directly to you in real time. And we're seeing a lot more of that functionality come into the Teams meetings as well that we'll talk about later.
Definitely. One of my favorite features, or the features that I've seen most recently, is the delayed send capability. And I apologize if you're an avid listener to the podcast. I can't remember if I actually mentioned this last month as well. But what it allows you to do is right click the send button when you're going to send something on a chat and then delay that for another time. So if you're like me, you're a bit of a workaholic, you're sat there in the evening, you see something that might be really useful to one of your colleagues, or maybe there's just something come up, you can still send that. You don't have to think, oh, I don't want to interrupt them anymore. You can still send it, but you can delay that send to a later date. I haven't actually seen if that's available on the mobile client yet. I know it is available on the Windows client, but I think it's a good feature, especially when we're looking at that mental health and well-being of our fellow colleagues. I hope maybe in the future that you could maybe set those hours yourself. So from my side, maybe I could choose that anything I send after a certain time, it will just delay send it for me automatically, or it will pop up and ask me, do I want to delay send it because it's happening later? I think there might be some features that we're going to go through today that might be feeding into that in the future. But I think it's a really positive step to see that included now in Teams. You've been able to do it in Outlook for some time.
I think it's really good because it, in effect, for yourself as well, you parked that question. You know you've asked the person that question, but you know they're not going to respond immediately. So it helps you to put that that train of thought to bed as well. So yeah, I've used that quite a few times, and it does come up with a prompt actually. Sometimes in Teams and says, do you want to wait until this person's back into their working hours? Is it in? It might not be Teams, but I think it does that in Outlook, doesn't it? For
yeah,
for
it does it
messages.
in Outlook at the top. You get a suggestion, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. So let's move on to the main subject then. So Microsoft Ignite, I think this is is this the second Ignite that we've seen this year? I think we saw one back in May, didn't we?
Yeah,
and
I
I
believe
think
so.
Microsoft next year appear to be going back to the normal format of once a year. I've seen it advertised for next November happening already, so I'm not expecting to see two happening next year. Obviously, this has been a bit of a thing during the COVID period that they've been doing more virtual events. We'll see if it turns more into a physical event next year, but I would like to think with Microsoft's hybrid working, it will still remain both hybrid and in person moving forward, so virtual and in person moving forward. And a wealth of updates have come out with Microsoft Ignite. First of all, Megan, Anthony, anyone got any specific thoughts and opinions on how our listeners or how our viewers should be getting up to speed with the announcements, apart from listening to our podcast, where hopefully we're going to distill some of the main Microsoft 365 ones? But what tactics do you use to keep up to date with these things?
So the main area I look at is called the Book of News. So the Ignite 2020 2022 Book of News. You can sit and look at all of the presentations, and Satya and a few of the other people have did some really good presentations, but they were quite wordy and they're quite commercial. If you want to get to the facts, then just search for the Ignite 2022 Book of News. Everything is just listed out really nicely in there. You have to be a bit careful because it's it's almost like a now and not really situation with a lot of things. They announce them and they're not there until later in the year. And other things that they announce have been there for some time already. So it's always good just to have a read through that and then go and click through some of the links and then go and see if you can find them in your application and see if you can start using those.
So mine is similar to Anthony. I use the Book of News to figure out what's interesting to me and what I want to look at in more detail. And then from there, I just find some relevant community blogs and whatnot. I like the videos. I like to see it in a little bit of action if they've got some demos on it and people talking about it as well, whether that is the video that was actually at Ignite or if it's just somebody distilling that down into like a 2-minute video. So I quite like the community videos and content that people put together as well.
Yeah, I think it's you've got to find what works for you. I think the product roadmap is another good place to look. Typically after something like Ignite, you see the roadmap get updated so you can track those features and functionality, find out when they're going private preview, public preview, GA, etc. from that perspective. So with so much information at Ignite to distill, to share, I thought we'd start by focusing on Microsoft Teams, because for me, this seems to be one of the busiest areas in terms of where we're going to see the innovation moving forward. And when I was going through the updates, a large amount of the updates were sitting in Microsoft Teams. And I think we'll start straight away with Microsoft bringing out a new SKU, a new version of Teams, a new license for Teams, for want of a better word, called Teams Premium, that will be available as an add-on. I think there's some suggestion that it's going to be about $10 per user per month. Anthony, have you got any initial thoughts, or were there any standout features that are going to be included in Teams Premium that you thought were of interest?
I think there's so much included in there. It's almost like they're creating a kind of second class of Teams user. So you'll have your users with the premium license and users without the premium license. One of the big areas is around customizing and branding meetings. So one of the functions you'll be able to do within Teams Premium is going to be able to customize the together mode, customize the lobby, so you can brand it up with your own company details, and get your organizational branding on there and make it feel like it'll be a computer world meeting experience rather than just a Teams meeting experience, which I think is a really, really good thing to do, especially if you're kind of doing business to consumer type meetings. Then it'll just really brand it up with who you are and what you do.
Megan, anything that stood out to you, or other features that stood out to you?
Mine was probably the virtual appointments. It feels like a separate application, but it's a feature. So if anyone's used Bookings in the past or looked at Bookings in the past, they're sort of integrating Bookings and Teams together, so you can set up virtual appointments. So it will obviously show your availability, so people can book a meeting with you. And I think the use case they gave were sales in retail or healthcare professionals, and that one really sort of stuck with me. If you had like a virtual doctor and that people wanted to see, you could book your appointment online. When you then join, you get put into your waiting queue, and the person that's hosting the meeting can see that waiting queue, and they can see how many people are in there, how long they've been waiting, when they joined, etc. You can push updates and notifications to the people in the queue. So if you're running 10 minutes behind, you could say, "Hi Barry, we're running 10 minutes behind, I'll be with you as soon as possible." And then they join that meeting. So it's not just that experience of how to book it, it's actually the experience of when they join that meeting, what happens then, if there is a waiting queue, what happens there, and you get that sort of insight view into that as well. So I think that's really good to bring what is an already useful application like Bookings into Teams, and I can see how that will be really useful in a lot of the, what's the word I'm looking for, different professionals, the different areas of work. But I think actually across all sort of sectors, it can be really useful once you find the right use case.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's a lot of elements in there, such as the ability to send an SMS when someone signs up for a meeting to remind them, and being able to remind them to be able to make sure when they join, they can join from a mobile phone and they don't have to download the Teams app. They can just do it via the mobile phone browser. They get the company logo, so they know that they're joining a professional meeting from that perspective. Sorry, Anthony, I don't know if you had any other points there.
No, just to agree with what you said. Another area in the Teams Premium license that really got me was this thing, and it's going back to what Megan was saying with the speaker coach. It's like having an AI resource listening to the conversation and interpreting it, and that's this thing called intelligent recap. So as you're going through a meeting, whether you're at the meeting or not, the AI can be listening to the meeting and doing things like generating tasks. So if someone in the meeting says something like, "Let's get Anthony to do this, this, and this," it'll interpret that and create it as a task, which you can then approve or ignore. And that kind of functionality is going to save so much time in meetings. Just being able to go back to an intelligent recap of the meeting at a later date and see who said what and which actions were agreed, and for those to actually appear in Planner and Tasks and Planner to enable you to capture all of those things. Because I think there's a lot of, we do have a lot of meetings, and I know other organizations, we're quite good at this, but I know other organizations say we just seem to have meetings for meeting's sake. Actually having somebody that's listening and creating those tasks for you and giving you the ability to go back in and just remind yourself of what you said in the meeting, what other people said mentioning you in the meeting, is excellent. And another kind of caveat on, another kind of enhancement on that is, which I think is brilliant, is this live translation functionality. So we're getting used to having closed captions on there, but now I think we can choose up to 40 different languages that those captions can be instantly translated into, which will work much better with multilingual meetings. So really good functionality in there.
I think sort of adding on to the recording functionality you mentioned, there's intelligent playback and personalized insight. So the first one puts chapters in the meeting. So if significant things happened, you'll be able to go and back and look at a recording, and it might be a 2-3 hour meeting, God forbid. But you'll be able to go through and see significant things that happened in that meeting, which I think is where the personalized insights come in, that you'll be able to see Anthony joined the meeting, Anthony left the meeting, you started presenting, and other things, screens being shared and stuff like that. So I think that will make the recordings more digestible when you need to review them and go back to them.
Yeah, I think what's been around for that as well is transcription. The fact that you can search in transcription. I mean, that's been here for a while now, but the fact that you can do that makes it a lot easier. The only thing is they're making Teams meetings so great and so many features in there. Normal in-person meetings are just gonna be terrible from now on, because I'm gonna have to take my own notes. I'm gonna have to take my own actions. I'm just gonna put a Teams meeting for everything because it makes it so much easier these days.
And I think this is what Microsoft want, really, and that's I think an area we'll come to later is the Teams rooms. But they've got like this new concept of specialized meeting rooms that are set out because actually the Teams is going to do all the functionality, and almost you're in the room but you're still watching what's going on the screen to give that functionality. So the last couple of areas I think in the Teams Premium in this add-on, one was the advanced webinars, and we've been using the webinar functionality since it came out. We actually went from Zoom webinars over to Teams webinars, and undoubtedly Zoom is better at webinars as it sits there today. I mean, we've got to be open and honest about that. But I think a lot of the things that we're missing in Teams is coming to this Teams Premium license. So the ability to be able to have a registration waitlist with manual approvals. Maybe you want to be able to open something up that is only available to select people or a select offer, so you want to be able to go through it and approve who's going to attend. A thing that we did use in Zoom that we haven't been able to use in Teams without a set of automation is the reminder emails, to just send reminders and personalize those reminders emails. The virtual green room as well. So this bit I always find quite awkward in a Teams webinar, that when you get to the end, you then want to disconnect from the attendees, have the presenters just there be able to reflect on what they've presented and the questions that might get asked, with the confidence that the attendees aren't still watching. So almost when we do a Teams webinar, you end up hanging up on everyone, including the co-hosts that you might have brought on. With the green room, you'll be able to do that, and with the final feature, which is managing what the attendees see, you will be able to control what is on screen, what's going to be shown, and stuff like that. So I think with those features coming out, they will become they will make team webinars truly usable. I think the savings from moving from Zoom webinars or WebEx or something like that that people may be using won't be too bad, assuming that just maybe your marketing department could go for that premium license if they're scheduling the webinars. We need some more clarity, I feel, around the licensing, and I'm sure we'll get that a little bit later. Any other features in there that anyone wants to run through?
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see how many of users take that up and what the actual licensing model is, to see whether everyone who wants to take advantage of those personalized insights and things like that is going to need the premium license. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get some clarification on that soon.
Yeah, no, I think. Oh, sorry, Barry.
I think they've suggested that public preview is going to be in December, I believe.
Yeah.
They've not suggested whether you'll need the licensing to get that, or maybe it's going to be everybody on public preview. We'll wait and see. And then I think go live will be at some point in January or 2023 from that perspective, with I think some of the AI related things coming later in 2023. Everything else I think they're suggesting will be at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, but I think it's getting pretty close now with Zoom. The comparison between the two products. And I know things like polls, I think, have gone in there as well. So you can do a poll in webinars and bits like that. So it's getting very close. And I think it's a a lot of people will be reviewing next time they come around to their Zoom license, reviewing whether they need it or not. So it's all looking good. And I think the way in which Microsoft have done it, rather than just rush it, they've just thought it through quite a lot and built some of that AI in as well, is really, really good.
So this isn't where all the features ends. Microsoft's not taking all of the new features and putting them into a premium license. So those that don't wish to update, there's a number of new updates that are coming into the mainstream version of Teams. And what I quite liked is when any of these elements were being spoken about, they did refer to the Microsoft Work Trend Index report that was published earlier on this year. And actually, those of you that are coming to our in-person event, Define Tomorrow in Bristol on the 23rd of November, myself and Computer World's HR officer are going to be looking at that Work Trend Index, looking at the research behind it, and looking at actually what Microsoft are doing to help these key areas of work. So probably head over to definetomorrow.co.uk. There's a banner up there where you can click through to go and look at all of the event. We're welcoming people from IT professionals to Change and 365 champions. There's 2 dedicated stages on there. So it'd be great to see some of our listeners at Define Tomorrow. But maybe Megan, I don't know if there's any other features coming in the new Teams meeting features that you want to go through.
Yeah, so one of them, and I think we've spoken about this on quite a few of the podcasts before, is around the avatars. So they've said that meeting avatars will be available in private preview. Now is private preview. So I am looking forward to seeing how that works, to see if it is something you can engage with, or if it is just something that is you try it out a couple of times and maybe after that you don't use it. So meeting avatars, or mesh avatars as they're being called, are in private preview for Teams meetings at the moment. So that's that little bit into when we were talking about AR, VR, all of that sort of futuristic look and feel of the future of work is actually the now of work. It is coming sooner than you think. That didn't mean to sound so dooming.
I think the way that you create avatars is quite good and quite engaging. It's going to be a Teams app that you obviously load, or you can pin there if you're going to use it for your employees, and you can dress yourself, style yourself as you should wish to. I think it's going to take a bit of getting used to. I think it does increase that inclusivity, maybe also detaches a bit of the personal experience that maybe we like from those willing to turn the cameras on, kind of thing. I think we've got to wait to see it actually in action first and see how that goes.
Feels like you're having a meeting with the Sims characters you used to create. When I saw the video of them creating them, I was like, that just takes me back to the Sims, which I loved the Sims, but yeah, I don't know that I'd want a meeting with them.
Yeah, I don't know how we'd feel doing this podcast. I mean, if we're seeing live images of us talking and you get to see a lot more of, what we're like and our facial expressions and things like that. If it's just an avatar who, the face is going to look like it's had too much Botox, and all of those, and the way in which you move is going to be very much based on, the very smooth movement that people like to have in that environment. I just don't know whether I'm going to connect with those people as people, and it's just going to make it even more awkward when you meet them at an event like Define Tomorrow, because you're just not gonna. You're going to think, oh, I know why you created that avatar now. Yeah.
Hate to think about what you're going to think of mine, Anthony.
Yeah.
There's a number of other features coming there then. So Anthony, you already mentioned Cameo, which was one of the features that they also spoke about that's now on Live, or GA as they call it. XL Live, Anthony, do you want to run us through what XL Live is, and also they expanded further as to other things that were coming when it comes to Live?
Yeah, I think XL Live, I've failed to get it working so far. We've tried recently. As I said before, you never quite know when this functionality is going to drop into your tenant. But XL Live is very much like PowerPoint Live in that it allows you to share an Excel spreadsheet and for people to work on it. Probably doesn't add as much functionality as PowerPoint Live does. But they're saying that you'll be able to do that with any application. And it really is, at the moment, we can share a screen and we can hand over the control to someone else in the meeting, and then we can get the control back. And I think what they're going to do is just to make that a two-way thing. So, multiple people can have access to the same application at the same time in that shared environment, which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because we're not all using Microsoft applications all the time that have got this functionality built into them. So we'll be able to, in effect, share a screen. It's almost like sharing a whiteboard with multiple users on it, and we're all able to actually drive the application simultaneously. So yeah, that I think will change the way in which a lot of us work as well. So I'm looking forward to being able to test that out and see that come live, because I think it'd be a really good function.
Another of those features was tweaks to Together Mode. So I think Together Mode was much anticipated when it was waiting to be released. There was lots of research out there about how it could reduce meeting fatigue and things like that. And obviously the concept was by removing each person's individual background, it means that your eyes can focus on one theme rather than 8 different cameras, 20 different cameras, etc., which are effectively each different streams of data. I think realistically, I've not seen many people use it in anger. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think it can come across as a little bit cartoony. I think avatars are going to make that even worse or even better, depending on how you look at it. However, one of the big features is the fact that everyone can kind of set their own Together Mode, and there was no ability to impose that we should all go into a Together Mode session so everyone could be experiencing the same thing at the same time. So it had to be an individual, had to feel like doing it to gain the advantage. So some of the features we've seen is the ability that you will be able to select for everybody to go into Together Mode, which I quite like. And the second one was the ability to select where the presenters and the attendees sit. And I did try and use this for one session that I was in. The problem was I was presenting and I ended up sitting in the middle of all the people in the Together Mode scene. So it felt a little bit awkward that it looked like I was sat in a cinema trying to talk to everyone that was around me. And it just didn't kind of set the right mental image that I was trying to gain from going in that Together Mode. So we'll see where these go. I think one of the Teams Room premium features that we didn't mention was the ability to brand the meetings and set branded Together Mode scenes and things like that. So we'll see how these things go and whether it drives the adoption or whether it tends to just be a gimmick that only a small amount of people use. I don't know if either of you got any specific opinions on that.
I've never liked the fact that I can see myself in a meeting, because if I'm in the office I won't see myself. So I don't want to see myself sat in the back row in a Together Mode meeting. So I've never known why they haven't provided a functionality to turn that off. I know they have done now in Teams where you can say I don't want to see myself. But yeah, it makes sense for people to be in the same seats and for people to be in the same scene, because then you can work together. So yeah, I think that'll help. I think it was a little bit of a gimmick, the Together Mode business to start with, and they've now started to refine that. So I think it will just add some, make it a lot easier in those kind of meetings. Megs?
I personally don't like that you can roll it out to everybody else. I can see why you would, but I wouldn't want someone to force me into Together Mode. Personally, I quite like pinning people on my screen. If the person is presenting, I like pinning them or spotlighting them. The one that's just for me, not for everybody, just the one for me, because at that point I can see their facial reactions when they're presenting and talking to me. If you're in Together Mode, you can't really see that because everyone is put in that same height, same size and all of that, which I don't get that full I don't what's the word? I'm struggling with my words today. Don't interact as well with that. I don't get it if I don't see their facial reaction. So I wouldn't necessarily want somebody to push Together Mode out to me in a meeting, because I'm quite happy with my scenario the way it is.
I think it definitely needs some consideration. The places I think it could work is if you're working collaboratively, if you're trying to come together as a small group of people and that you agree to maybe try and do that in a Together Mode session to see how it changes things, for example. Maybe if it had a cameo-like feature where you could share your application in the Together Mode or something like that as well. But I suppose that's where we're starting to come into Microsoft Mesh and the virtual headsets and going into a more immersive experience, which I suppose whilst I've mentioned that, it was really interesting to see that Microsoft have announced a partnership with Meta, the Facebook parent company, to make Microsoft Teams Mesh available on the Meta headset. So that's the Oculus Rift 2 and the Oculus Rift Pro. Pro that's coming out
Yeah.
shortly as well. So I'd be quite interested to see how those experience on those headsets soon, and certainly makes it a little bit more affordable than the HoloLens headsets that I think are more like £2,500–3,000. You can pick up an Oculus Rift 2 for about 350, or the Pro for about £1,500 for a more professional level device. So they're certainly more attainable for individuals and organizations. So let's move on to some of the chat and collaboration features that were announced. The first one that I've got on my list here was the video clip functionality that's already GA. I think we all noticed that you could do that recently. I did try it out in anger the other day. There are some limitations. It is only a video message. You can't share your screen. I was anticipating that maybe I could just do a quick stream style video where you could choose to share your screen and your camera at the same time. And you are also limited to 1 minute's worth of video. So I ended up sending 3 1-minute videos to get the point across that I wanted to make. I used OBS to be able to share my screen as well as my camera. I really didn't use it for the intended use case, and the person actually didn't reply to it. So I think they kind of thought, what on earth is this? It didn't have the desired effect where I thought I might be able to just keep something moving between meetings, share a quick video to show how something had progressed and get a bit of feedback quickly. It hasn't worked in that scenario, but interesting use case, and I think we'll see that built upon a little bit further. I don't know if either of you have tried it or have any thoughts on that at the moment.
I haven't tried it, but I can definitely see how it would be useful. I can see that, especially if you haven't had a catch up like in your team. It's even simple things like someone in my team's on holiday this week, but it would be nice when they get back next week for me to send a quick video message, say, hey, hope you had a nice holiday. Look forward to our meeting at 10 o'clock and we'll catch up then. It's not something that I'd need to do, but it'll be such a nicer touch for Georgia to come back to a message like that rather than the 30 planner tasks I've assigned her in the week without any explanation when she comes back.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? We used to have a nice little bit of research that Polly had done about how different generations like to communicate. And the modern generation, I think, as we like to call them, like to do it with video. So it doesn't really do it for me. I'm quite happy to type something out, and I'd rather pick up the phone and talk to someone, to be honest. But I think the modern generation are used to using videos like that. I sound like a right old fogey here. But,
thanks, Grandad.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see where that would go. So out of those chat and collaboration features, any stand out? I don't think we need to go through each one, knocking them all on the box. I mean, there are ones like increased amount of emojis coming into Teams, so you can have more individual reactions. There's 800 emojis. I don't know how we're ever going to pick which emoji we want to use for every situation. And any of those others that stand out, Megan, to you?
No, I think
Sorry,
Megan, you go first. So.
Thank you. I think there's probably 2 that I thought were good. The first one is the fact that you can reply to everyone in a group chat. I know before, when we've got a group chat with about 6 of us in there, if you want to tag everybody, you have to go through and tag them all individually. It's probably not the best way, or you just send it and hope people see it, even though you haven't tagged them. The fact that you'll now be able to put at everyone and everyone will see it, that's a really nice, simple feature, but it does make a difference. And the other one is suggested replies. Now, this is one that I love and I hate, because it does make it easier on a one-to-one basis. And now they're coming into group chats. The bit I hate about it is it doesn't sound like me, but they do make them easier, so I do start using them. But when it's like, sure, absolutely, no problem, I'm like, I'd never say that, but it's so much easier than me typing saying, yeah, no worries. So the fact that they're coming to group chats, again, it's just a nice to have. It's good that it's coming to group chats as well.
Yeah.
Now over to you, Anthony.
What she said, all of that is what I was going to say.
Yeah, there's another few in there, but I don't think anything that's groundbreaking. We've already mentioned scheduling your send. You can now delete yourself from chats, one-to-one chats and group chats without annoying others or impacting others. I don't know if I deleted myself from the chat with me and Anthony, that probably would still have an impact on Anthony because he'd be talking to himself. So yeah. I can get it from a group chat if you've been included in a wider group chat. Maybe you were a starter. But I agree with Megan. The app mentioned in the group chat is probably the most useful feature that I've seen from that perspective. Now, an area that I think was probably going to have quite a big impact on end users is the new channel experience. And I think it's an area that people are probably, it's going to be quite apparent that there's going to be changes happening there. And I think what they're implementing makes sense. And I'll get one of you to go through it in the moment. But almost we've already got used to the way that Microsoft wanted to do it was different to every other application that works this way. And now they're changing it to the way that every other applications work. So Megan, do you want to go through this as it's kind of Teams functionality kind of thing from a trainer perspective? What are the changes they're making to the channel experience?
So I think the biggest one is that the sort of timeline on your post bit in channels is changing. So typically you would have the composer box at the bottom, you would post that, and then the latest message would be at the bottom of the timeline. Now they're changing it to be more like the Yammer sort of experience where the composer box is at the top. You can post different types of comments and conversations. So you can now post like a Q&A one, which I can see the use case in that. That'll be incredibly useful. But now when you post that from the composer box at the top, the latest post is then at the top of the page again, which that is going to take some getting used to because people are so used to looking at the bottom of their screen now to find that latest post. And now it's at the top. But that was a big surprise to me when I saw that at Ignite, purely because it's just not what I expected. I hadn't heard that was coming, and it literally is flipping it on its head to now you have to look somewhere else. So that's going to take some getting used to trying to find that. And I think the key bit here is just make sure you're tagging people in it, mention them in those comments because they're less likely to miss it if you do that than whilst we're all getting used to this sort of new way, just tag people in it.
I think the new info pane is going to be quite an improvement. So you'll be able to go and see those pin chats and things like that much easier when you click the info when you're in a channel to see what's going on there.
Yeah, I think the previous way in which messages were pinned in chats, in channel chats, was a bit odd. You had to go and hit the info button and go and find it. Whereas now, when it's just and that functionality is already there, it's just puts a banner across the top saying here's the pinned chats. So that's been really useful because otherwise, it was almost like a thought process you had to go through. I wonder if someone's pinned anything in here. I'll go and look at it. But now it's just there in front of you, so it looks really good. And as you said, Barry, the info pane just really useful. It's using the AI again and to try and put interesting things in there, relevant things for you in there. So yeah, looking forward to seeing that coming live.
I think the last point of this new channel experience to me looks like they're borrowing a bit from Yammer really. So you'll be able to take channel headers to go and put a graphic that is relevant to the channel that you're in, which obviously you can do inside Yammer or Viva Engage at the moment. And the other one is post type, so you'll be able to have announcements and so on and so forth, which I thought you could already have announcements in a Teams channel there, Megan. I don't know if you've read any more about that.
I haven't read too much into that one. You can have announcements in Teams already. But when we say announcements, there wasn't that much that came of it other than you could put like a big header text. I don't know if the one in Teams now is going to send like an email like it does in Yammer. I need to have a look into that. The bit I do find that is useful is the types of sort of conversations you can have now that you can do Q&A and stuff like that in a team. I always found that interesting that you could do that into Yammer, into your community or your all company thing. It's highly unlikely I ever send an all company question out to everybody. I'm more likely to need that within my team when I'm asking them about a specific project or something that we're running. So it is nice to see that coming to Teams now because I can now use that functionality, and hopefully it still has all the functionality of marking the right answer and stuff that Viva Engage has within Teams, because I do find that incredibly useful.
Makes sense. So let's move on to Microsoft Places then. So this is a brand new application announced by Microsoft at Ignite. Anthony, I think you've been looking into this a little bit.
Yeah, so this is trying to address that issue of hybrid meetings. It just looks really good. Microsoft got this phrase that they were saying that people make a place a space. So I think the marketing department's been working overtime to come up with something like that. But I've had that problem, that thing that Microsoft's called commute regret, where I've driven all the way into the office and found that I'm just sat working on my own. So you just think, why did I make all the effort to drive up there and there's no one there? And that's one of the issues that Microsoft Places is trying to address. So it's going to be almost like a shared calendar, so that you can say when you're going to be in the office. So when you book a meeting, you'll have to let it know whether that's a meeting that you're going to do physically in the office or you're going to do online. And then you'll be able to look at the week and see, which days are people in the office and which rooms are they using. And therefore you'll be able to create those opportunities to physically meet with people through that application. It's got some clever stuff in there about travel times. So, it'll look at your calendar and let you know how long it's going to take to get there. Or if you're going to meetings externally, it'll be able to do that kind of thing as well. It's got wayfinding around the office as well, which I don't think is going to be too much of a problem for us with our office, because I think you could stand in the middle and see most of the things that are going on. But in bigger campus type environments like Microsoft, I can see that will be very useful in that it can kind of direct you to the offices. But no, I think it's really quite an innovative application. It's something that's got a real place in organizations, because I think they realize that, you are going to want to, there is a real benefit in physically meeting with people. And this will help you to organize that kind of meeting.
I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that at all, Megan.
Yeah, only a quick one. When Anthony was saying you could sort of see where people are working that week, I think one of the sort of nice bits that they were showing in that was if you were in the scheduling assistant in Outlook, as you scan over the sort of days across everyone on the sort of left-hand side, it would just put a little icon that is their home icon or their office icon. It just makes it really easy to see at a quick glance to see where people are, and I think you'll get stats as well into what it's looking like in terms of actually 70% of the workforce are going to be in the office on Wednesday, and that may help you understand, actually, I need a quiet day on the Wednesday, probably best not to go to the office, or actually I really want some collaboration time. Wednesday looks like the best day to go. So just a couple things that they're implementing. Again, they just seem like such small things, but actually when you look at them and understand them, they are incredibly useful and will make the difference as to how people use it.
Definitely. So really looking forward to hearing more about Places. To me, I don't think they mentioned how it was going to be licensed, if it was included in an existing license, for example. To me, it feels like it's got more functionality than something that's just going to be bolted on, with the ability to have the wayfinding capability, the insights. It feels like there's going to be, I don't want to say it, but yet another license that you need to be considering in there. It's probably about time that the standard SKUs were just realigned and these were put into the relevant areas, but we'll see what was going on there. As we look to kind of get towards the point where we wrap up, I think there was some good features. That we saw a new type of camera form factor for Teams rooms. Anthony, I know this is something that you liked. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen these in the past, but this kind of center of the room camera with a full 360-degree view. What I've noticed when we're using our team rooms in the office is that the remote person's getting a view of the whole room. Now, with things like the Neat board that we've got, then it will chop up the individual people, but you still almost feel like you're looking at people down a tunnel rather than seeing them face to face. So this kind of form factor of a camera that sits in the middle, almost like a turret in the middle of the screen, that can then look at everything around it and chop the individuals into individual boxes, makes you feel like you're more face to face with people rather than seeing them down the length of a room. So really like that. I'm really keen to try one of those out and see how we get on with that.
It's good to see a modern version of that, because I seem to remember a poly version of that about 10 plus years ago that you used to be able to get, but it was based on mirrors. So it had, I think, one single camera that went up to a prism on the top of it that had mirrors that allowed the image to kind of come into one image. So there was no artificial intelligence in it or anything like that. It was just a clever bit of trickery and placement of mirrors on a camera. So I think it's recycling that idea, but clearly in this day and age we can have multiple cameras, we can have artificial intelligence and bring that together into something that actually works, I think.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts on features or elements that you saw in Microsoft Ignite? Anthony, we'll start with you because I know you might need to drop off the call shortly.
I think we've covered a lot of stuff there. It's always that question of, is it there yet or not? But I will keep looking, and I'll keep people up to date with things as they arrive. I think it's a really exciting time. I wasn't really very excited by the presentations, but when I got my head into the book of news and saw all the stuff that actually been talked about, I think it's really, really coming together with Teams now. We've not seen many additional functions in there for a long time, but it's becoming a really feature-rich environment, and it is really becoming that hub for working. So yeah, I think it was a really, really good Ignite this year. I don't know how they're going to carry on getting 2 Ignites in every year, as you said earlier. That could be quite challenging. But to be honest, this functionality just keeps coming and coming. So maybe we'll get away with 2 next year. I think the Post-it Note app as well looked really good as well. Yeah, I know you like that, Barry, didn't you?
Yeah, I've since searched for it and not been able to find it, so I don't know if it's only available internally at 3M or whether it was a preview of something to come. I'm someone that loves a bit of physical stationery. I love a decent pen and a nice pad, and using a Post-it note to help do a in-person collaboration session. I don't think you can beat it. And what 3M, obviously the makers of the traditional Post-it note, have come up with is an app that allows you to scan Post-it notes that are being put on a whiteboard or a wall into a virtual environment. So even people that are remotely can see what Post-it notes are going up on the wall. You can then rearrange them. You can tag people in them. The people virtually can add them. Unfortunately, they then don't appear on your physical wall, because that would just be witchcraft and wizardry, but that would be quite cool. But I think it was a good example as to hybrid working, where the physical, the tangible, the something that you can hold, could be met with a digital version of something that is still very relatable.
Yeah.
And I think the other 2 things for me with the Microsoft Loop app, I don't think we saw any real progress on that from where we'd seen it announced previously, but it's still very much coming. We're all seeing Loop components being able to be used in new scenarios. I don't know, Megan, I think you saw some examples where Loop was being added to. I don't know if you've got that information.
Yeah, so you can, people have been using it in chat in Teams for a while now, but you could copy that and put it into a Word document online, or you could put it into something like a whiteboard. And I thought a whiteboard would be really good, because then even after the meeting, you could go and add to it, and it could still then be updated in the chat. But you could do that live in the meeting, in the whiteboard, whilst you're in that meeting.
And then I think the final one for me was the Microsoft 365 app. Now, there wasn't much of an announcement here, because they previously spoke about this at the last Ignite as to the new features coming to the Office app. The big news here was that it's going to be called the Microsoft 365 app. It's going to have that kind of continuous scroll on the things that you've been working with, a place to go for templates and things like that. But I think the big news was that's going to start rolling out next month. So I think that's going to be a much needed improvement. And it's one of those things that whenever I'm working with an organization, they don't know about the Office app. It's not an app they've considered actually going in and looking in. They're too busy looking at Word, PowerPoint, Excel, etc., rather than going to consider actually what does the Office, or in this case the Microsoft 365 app, do for the business.
So, my other bits the only other bits that I sort of picked up on were, there's a few things coming to Viva. So I think if you've got the right thing in Viva, you can get like a meeting effectiveness survey. So at the end of each team meeting, if you've got that turned on, people can vote and say how effective that meeting was, and then you get that update to say, look, 70% of your meetings were really effective, 20% weren't, and you can then look at which meetings they were and maybe make some amends based on how you hosted that meeting or anything like that. And the bit I liked on that is around Viva, that IT can now push quiet time settings for all of the organisation. So whilst at the moment I have to go set my own as an individual, if I didn't know about that, I wouldn't have mine set, and therefore I'd get my Teams messages in the evening when I'm sat on the sofa watching TV, and it would distract me from my own time. IT can actually say, look, between 5:30 and 9 a.m. we're not going to have any things, and then people can go and turn that off if they want to, but IT can actually push that out, which is just a nice feature in terms of the sort of mental wellness to make sure that as an organization you're taking care of people. And the other one is Microsoft Designer, which we probably don't have time to discuss because I could be here all day talking about how useful I can see that being. But the new app called Microsoft Designer looks really good, but we can cover that in a separate podcast. But if you are interested in something like that, if you are a marketing team or you create graphics or anything like that, there is a wait list at the moment to get access to that. So just go to, I think it's designer.microsoft.com, join that wait list, and then you should have access to it when they start rolling it out.
I think we could do a whole podcast. Maybe we do the next podcast on the Viva announcements, because Viva Engage, the introduction of stories and storylines in there changes how that application can be used in a business. So I think that's probably our next podcast title.
Definitely. So lots of good features, lots of good functionality coming to Microsoft Teams. As ever, it's all about how can your organization use these tools effectively. You shouldn't, as Anthony says, go to the toolbox, find a tool, and then find out how to use it. You should be considering what is your business's challenges, purpose, goals. Maybe use Viva Goals to help you set some of those things, and then find which tool would best help you serve that. So we highly recommend having a look at the Adopt 365 platform. It's a learning and development platform where all of these features, where they come out, are taught for your users. There's sessions for champions. There's monthly live training. So go and have a look at that. You can head over to adopt365.co.uk, reach out to any of us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'll happily demonstrate that to you. Or why not come to our live event based in Bristol, 23rd of November, which is called Define Tomorrow. We've got the dedicated Change Champion stage. Megan and Anthony will be demonstrating lots of different features and technology and tactics you can use to make the tools inside Microsoft 365 more successfully adopted inside your business. So I think that's it for today. Megan, Anthony, thank you ever so much for joining me today. I think we all can't wait to see some of these features drop. I think it's like learning about what you're going to get for Christmas, but then having to wait 6 months for Christmas actually to come.
Yeah.
So hopefully we will be drip feeding when we see the features and what we see coming from them in the future. Thank you ever so much for listening to this episode of the Adopt 365 podcast. If you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe, give us a like on YouTube, and make sure you put some comments below as to what you'd like to hear in the future. Thank you ever so much for joining us today.
Thank you.